Okay, hello and welcome to the second race here in the Golden Era Championship hosted by CVR. My name's Pirate Laserbeam. I'm standing in to do commentary for this league going forward, having been welcomed by Garamond, and we are just about to start the race here at circuit of Tours, which is located in France. It's 1923 cars, and of course this is the 1923 Grand Prix from that very year. We have a grid of 16 cars here today, which I shall talk you through in a bit more detail as we get through the race. I was hoping to get online a little bit earlier on to give you guys a little bit of an introduction and some pre-race briefing, but due to some technical issues getting the stream started, we're going to have to probably just work that in as we work through the race itself. But the practice session is about to come to an end with another 20 seconds to go, and then we'll be getting on with the racing here at Tours, which is going to involve quite a lengthy race, about 2.5 hours of racing to come. It's going to be 17 laps of the circuit, and that should take approximately 2.5 hours. That will then be followed, hopefully, by a few interviews post-race with some of the drivers as we dissect how the race has gone. But yeah, looking forward to this. I'm really excited to be here to help CVR with the commentary here at the Golden Championship. So the race start will involve a race start as typical of the era. So a standing start, but it will be a kind of short interval start where each driver will roll off from the starting line from a standing start, but there'll be about a 1 to 2 second gap in between each driver as they roll off in order, and then that will lead to the beginning of the race with a bit of spacing between the cars, and then we'll get into 2.5 hours of hopefully action-packed racing here at the circuit. The starting lineup for the race will be Rahman Grosjean, who's in the first spot, with Kai Subston in P2, followed by Federico Juan Quintero Magias in P3, Montanage in 4th, Rai Lazaro in 5th, and then Etu Nurmi in P6, Mose Pereira in P7, Paul von Rosen in P8, Anssi Heitinen in P9, Marcus Peltonen in P10, Vesa Tolonen in P11, Zan Darling in P12, Issa McCullough in P13, Haley Smith in P14, and Christian Dauger in P15, Sander Wolbert in P16, Lippi in P17, JC Lemur in P18, Kari Jutila in P19, and Joni Lindholm in P20, and last but not least, Vila Korekarowski, who is going to be a name that I'm going to struggle to pronounce the entire race, in P21. So we should have a few moments to go before we crack on to the beginning of the race, and I'll do my best to cover the beginning of the race, which will be, as I mentioned there, in that short duration kind of rolling start or standing start, but easing off the line separated by a few seconds of gap. The circuit itself here at Tours is quite an interesting layout. It's essentially a giant triangle with some very long straights, coupled with some twisty sections through the towns at each end of the straights. The circuit will definitely favour cars of a higher top speed nature, but I'll get through a little bit of the detail about the cars and what's going to be happening here on the circuit. But effectively it's definitely going to favour top speed, as the long straights allow the cars to fully stretch their legs, and there's less twisty sections to allow cars which are more kind of acceleration orientated to get back some of that time that they might lose out on the straights. But that being said, there are some quirks to some of the vehicles which are being driven here today, and that's definitely going to have an impact on some of the later stages of the race potentially, where things like overheating, engine wear and gearbox wear become more of a factor. In terms of weather, the morning practice session started out with a very pleasant early morning mist at 8 PM local time. I just get myself into... There we go. Yeah, so an early morning start, 8 AM in-game time with a chilly morning, but a bit of light mist. But as the practice session has carried on. We've got a little bit closer to the beginning of the race, and at the end of the practice session we actually saw a bit of rain starting, and the forecast is potentially thunderstorms, so it could be a little bit of an interesting dynamic weather setup, and that may have an impact on some of the drivers and their cars as the race progresses. So we'll have to see how things pan out from that point of view. So as we wait for the race to get underway here. So on the front row here you can see Silverstone here in the C6, and then Romain Grosjean in the Bugatti Type 32 alongside. Practice seems to indicate that the Fiat 805 405s are going to be a pretty dominant factor in this race, but we'll have to see how things pan out. Obviously at the moment it is a C6 and a Bugatti on the front row for the race start. At 25 seconds to go till the race start. 22 cars, well 21 excluding the broadcast vehicle, on the circuit at the moment. And our race start lights are on screen. Lights are up, and our first driver, Romain Grosjean, Kai Silverstone, is on the way with... oh, actually we have a little bit of an interesting start there. Slightly different order to the... I think Montanage has gone through a little bit earlier there. So the 777 Bugatti, driven by Grosjean, is out in first spot. Seems to be a little bit of a delay with the other cars getting off the line. But at the moment the running order seems to be Romain Grosjean, followed by Montanage, who should technically have started in fourth place. We've got Megias in third place, which is as per the race start order. Lazaro should be in fifth, but is actually in fourth currently, and Kai Silverstone, who was second in the initial lineup, is currently running in fifth place right now. It's like our first potential overtake of the race, with Megias coming through, trying to make the overtake on the C6. My apologies, because he's in the C6, he's overtaken Lazaro there in the background. Up ahead we can see Montanage, who's broken away early. In a Delage 2LCV. Meanwhile the Bugatti 777, driven by Grosjean, holds on to P2 with a 6.9 second gap already opened up between P1 and P2 here. Further back we can see Megias in the 2LCV, so the C6, and in the background Lazaro in the Sunbeam, currently in P4, but looks to be under some pressure by Nurmi, who is one of the Fiat drivers, and the Fiat definitely having the top speed advantage here, and you can see Nurmi making massive gains now on the straights as the much longer legs on the Fiat start to stretch themselves, and he opens up a fairly significant run on the way down, overtaking at least 2 or 3 cars there. But now into the first of the corners. This is where things get a little bit interesting. Ooh, looks like the Bugatti driven by Grosjean is actually headed slightly off course and is having to do a bit of a U-turn as they've missed the braking point and appear to have gone off the track into the runoff area, narrowly avoiding a few other drivers and spectators by the looks of it, but they're back underway. It looks like a couple of cars have actually ended up in a similar position, getting caught out, with Darling as well in the number 6 Bugatti having made a similar mistake. Ooh, and initial contact there between Darling, who's now facing in very much the wrong direction as they try to get themselves reorientated in the key corner here. I think they're going to have to wait their turn to get out of the way, whilst other cars, and there's the issue. Got a car coming around the corner, potentially blind corner here, getting caught out then. If we just go to the onboard with Mr. Smith here, we'll see from Smith's point of view what happens when they come around the corner. They can't actually see Darling until it's a bit too late, and here they are heavily in the braking zone, and Darling now only just getting reorientated and underway as Smith manages to make a opportunity out of the misfortune from Darling there. It's up to P19 now. But the dominance of the Fiat here, and I shall get on to a little bit more of an explanation about the cars in a bit more detail in a second, is becoming clear now as Nurmi opens up a pretty significant gap to the rest of the pack, all during the first lap of the race here. So let's talk through a little bit about the vehicles on show today. So the Fiat 805, which we're currently watching here with Nurmi, it's clearly the fastest car of the year with its supercharger, which gave it significantly more power than the other cars on the track. Top speed is circa 200 kilometers an hour, although at the moment Nurmi isn't quite reaching that at this moment in time. The engine though can be quite unreliable, and cooling may be a little bit inefficient, so whilst the car definitely has the grunt on the straights, it may be a little bit more of a temperamental beast as the race progresses, and drivers will be cautioned to look after their gearbox and engine from an overheating point of view and damage point of view. The other downside of the supercharger, of course, is that with that speed comes a bit more of a thirsty nature, and whilst most cars use about 10 litres or less to do 100 kilometres, this beast will use about 36 litres, so definitely going to be a fuel consumption concern, and whether that offsets the advantage these cars have on the straights is going to be a factor we'll have to watch out and see. Tyres should last for the whole race length given their sturdiness at this point in time, but they may be susceptible to punctures from rocks or horseshoe nails in the road, so going to have to be something the drivers be very aware of. Nurmi just navigating round one of the tighter corners there, and you can see the risk there from their point of view of those pylons. Going to be something they need to keep an eye on, and brake markers will be very important. Let's take a look at some of the competition then. So we find Paul van Rosen. So Paul is in the Delage 2LCV. Pretty agile, fast car as well, but has some reliability issues of its own. In the engine department, gearbox seems to be pretty good on this one. 185 kilometers top speed, so about 15 kilometers an hour slower than the Fiat, but that's on a circuit which is primarily made up of long straights. Is a pretty significant gap and one to consider. But the good gearing is going to be working in the Delage's favour from an acceleration point of view, so coming out of those slower corners, the Delage will definitely be able to get back up to pace more quickly than some of the other vehicles. So if we take a look at our front here in the number 12 Sunbeam, driven by Mikola, having just overtaken the 777 there. Sunbeam's quite on par with the Delage when it comes to performance. It's also the most reliable vehicle on the grid here, so and also of the season. So mechanical issues shouldn't be too much of a concern for Sunbeam drivers, although of course, course permitting, it may be, such as here at Tour, it's not going to have the straight line grunt compared to the Fiat. But let's see whether that reliability comes into to the mix later on in the race, as overheating issues might be more of a concern, and fuel consumption becomes more of a concern for the Fiats. So next up is the Bugatti that I'm going to give you guys a little bit of an introduction to. So the number 2 here is the Bugatti T32, or Type 32. Has almost the same top speed as the Delage and the Sunbeam, but it has a smaller fuel tank and therefore a smaller range. It may therefore be spending a little bit more time watching that fuel gauge as the race progresses. Very agile car in the low speed corners, although it doesn't quite have the acceleration of the Delage. And it also becomes a little bit unstable, I'm told, at higher speeds due to it generating some lift. So in the higher speed corners it may become a little bit understeery, and that'll be one for the drivers to definitely watch, especially with some of these very long sweeping corners here. You can see the number 2 getting a little bit unsettled there on the inner edge of the corners. And it's also going to have some of the hardest time keeping the engine cool, as the radiator isn't particularly great on the Bugatti. You can see Nurmi still flying away there, but it's up next is the C6, so let's go and find one of those. So Kai Severston, who started in P2, now back in P2, is driving the Vorsan C6 Laboratoire, which is clearly the slowest car of the 23 pack and has less power. It has a gearing option to give it more top speed, so it may be a little bit of a car to watch in this race. So despite the speed, it's definitely holding its own here up in P2 for the time being. Pretty good range on this car with relatively good economy and enough fuel in the tank to take a pretty good race distance. Although it does become quite unstable when its rear tyres start to wear, even though it's only a car of that era to produce little downforce. So going to be an interesting race. Each of these cars having slight pros and cons, which may or may not contribute to success here at Tour. So the last one in the pack that we need to discuss, of course, is the A22. Just trying to spot if we have any drivers who are currently driving that. It's like to switch to, but I don't believe. Yes, we do. Hayley Smith. So Hayley in the P18 spot right now, in the A22. It's the slowest car, given it's a 22 model. It's not too reliable either, and has some issues with the engine department. So, as far as pros and cons go, the A22 appears to be the one with all the cons and not too many of the pros. But we'll see what Hayley Smith can do with the car here during the race today. So let's go to P2 at the moment with Peltonen and Silverstone, who are 0.6 of a second apart. The Fiat, driven by Peltonen, if I'm not mistaken, is certainly making things a little bit more challenging for the C6 to keep up with. On the straight line speed here, you can see that Mr. Peltonen is almost approaching 200 kilometers an hour, whereas the C6, driven by Silverstone in P3, is struggling to get quite to the same lofty heights. But at the moment, they are within 2 seconds, and we've been approaching another braking zone. We'll see whether there's any opportunity here for Kai Silverstone to make up any ground in the corners. Let's take a moment to discuss the results from the first race, because of course we are on the second race of the championship. The second race, I hasten to add, of many, so in total there will be quite a few races in this season. And I'm just trying to... Ooh, Kai Superson has just had a little bit of a mistake there coming through, and is now getting a little bit in the way of some of the other drivers, getting a little bit of contact there with one of the Bugattis. Let's hope they haven't received too much damage there from that, but they seem to be struggling to get back underway. Rear wheels kicking up a little bit of dust there as they start to get power back down, and that's taken them down from P2 to, or P3 sorry, to P8. Bit of smoke being deployed there by the car ahead, which appears to be Lazaro in the number 54. So, a bit of a disaster there for Kai Severson, and lots of work to do now to make up some of those lost positions. Certainly some of the drivers struggling in the braking zones as they enter the towns, and with the buildings being so close to the track, there's very little manoeuvring room for recovering from a mistake, and also the proximity of the buildings makes that risk of a mistake that bit higher. Kai now under pressure from Walbert in the number 12, and Walbert makes it look easy as they overtake in the number 12. Kai now dropping in behind, seeing if they can take advantage of a little bit of that slipstream. But they may be suffering from some damage following that contact with the buildings, and it remains to be seen how they will cope with the remainder of the race. As mentioned in the briefing notes, the C6 does have a little bit of a tendency to be a bit of a handful in the corners potentially, but you can see that Silverstone is making almost the most of the opportunity there, as they have another mistake and find themselves rolling off potentially through the crowd there. Hopefully no one's been hurt as they re-enter the track, and Kai Silverstone now down in P11. Let's go to Lindholm, who is in the Delage under pressure from the Bugatti, number 777, driven by Grosjean, and number 12 driven by Mikkola, as all three of these drivers now try to outpace each other on the straights here. Of course, the Sunbeam, Delage and Bugatti are all pretty similarly set up when it comes to top end speed, I believe here. Although you can see the Bugatti now in close proximity with Mikkola in the number 12 Sunbeam, and they are working their way down to another 90-degree right corner, so a lot of braking to consider, and an opportunity here for the Delage to take advantage of its acceleration to hopefully open up the gap. That'll be one of the top priorities for Lindholm at the moment, to ease away from the competition here and see if they can open up a gap and give themselves a little bit more breathing room. Meanwhile, the 777 Bugatti, driven by Grosjean here, is just topping out at 170 km an hour as they enter the braking area for the right-hander. Definitely an opportunity here for a mistake from the drivers. Let's see how they do. So far everyone seems to have got their braking just right. Bit of smoke coming out from the rear of number 12 Mikkola. I wonder if that's just a little bit of engine damage potentially. Although the cars don't seem to have cleared up, it may just be a natural component of the Sunbeam as they get under acceleration. So that's lap number 2 underway here. Roughly 10 minutes per lap, so plenty of opportunity for some more overtakes to come. Let's go back to P14, where we've got Darling and Dauger in the Bugatti. And Darling seems to have just snuck on past there, taking advantage of the top end. I think our good friend in P15 is in actually the Fiat 804, so I would expect them to have the top end advantage here, but they might be suffering from some damage. Meanwhile, Nurmi out in front in the Fiat is opening up a 30-second gap by the looks of it. 27.2 currently, working their way up towards that though. Meanwhile, back in Peter. Ooh, big contact for the number 777. Grosjean finds himself upside down and returns to the pits there after a very unfortunate contact. They looked like they were gaining a lot of ground, but that might have been because they weren't able to shed speed in the braking zone as quickly as they wanted to. Meanwhile, however, Walbert in the number 12 is leading ahead of Lemur in P9 currently. Lemur in the Delage 2LCV whilst Walbert's driving the Sunbeam. We may yet have a little bit of a battle unfolding between these two. As the race progresses. Lap 3 for the race leader at the moment. Into the braking zone, looks like Lemur taking an opportunity here to go slightly wider. Let's see if that acceleration comes in handy for the Delage. You can see them just about 1 second behind at the moment. Smoke billowing from Walbert's Sunbeam seems to be a feature of that particular vehicle as they break away from the acceleration zone. Meanwhile, we have a bit of a drag race unfolding here between Montanage and Haley Smith. But it looks like the Montanage Special is managing to break away as they come through the town though. This is where the cornering capabilities come in more important. And you can see Haley Smith starting to gain a little bit of ground as they fight back. But the Delage 2LCV driven by Montanage may be one to watch. Here working the car back up to speed, having come through one of the corners. And off they go. Looks like Montanage has broken away with a pretty significant gap unfolding now, 2.4 seconds currently, and looks to be being extended. Meanwhile, however, back in P8 we have Walbert and Lemur continuing what looks to be a bit of a fight unfolding here as well. However, let's take a little moment back to our friend Kai Silverstone in P11 currently in the C6. V Tolonen is starting to close in, only half a second behind now, and the top speed advantage here seems to be in favour of Tolonen, who is in the Fiat 805. So despite the gearing on the C6, the Fiat is just going to have that top speed advantage, which ultimately makes this a little bit of a hard fight to win for the C6 given the length of the straights here. But they are, however, not too much further away from a corner zone, and that may provide an opportunity for Kai Silverstone to get their own back, as they might have a little bit more success in the corners. You can see actually with the slipstream provided by Fiat in front, the C6 actually has the ability here to hit about 185 kilometers an hour, whereas the Fiat's doing about 186, 185, 186. So not quite hitting that 200 kilometer an hour top speed mentioned in the briefing pack. But I'm sure it's going to be driver skill and cornering capability where some of this gets decided. And we are approaching one of the cornering areas. Here we go, let's see whether the drivers manage to slow down. And the C6 is definitely ahead. This is where we had a little bit of an issue before with the C6 getting caught out on this very corner. This time it looks like Silverstone has managed to slow down enough and they managed to execute a lovely overtake there into the braking zone. And it's now Tolnen who has another driver coming up from behind in P12. Driving into Delage, where that acceleration definitely is a factor to consider. The Fiat needs a bit more time to get up to speed. But here you can see Tolnen and the Fiat reacquiring their target at the C6, manages to overtake, and it's also going to be a potential double overtake here with another Delage overtake on the C6. C6 just dropping back into the slipstream provided by Uatilla. He's just moved up to P11. And now with the straights ahead, Tolnen has the opportunity to open up the taps on that Fiat and start to break away, although of course coming through the slightly twistier sections now. But they seem to be keeping their foot in. Remains to be seen whether overheating becomes an issue for the cars later on. It was mentioned that some of these vehicles will struggle with heating, particularly the Bugattis. And it may just be that that hasn't been a factor yet. The Delage driven by Uatilla now starting to make some significant gains as they close in on P10, driven by Tolnen. This might be where the slight cornering and acceleration capabilities of the Delage become more important. There's like a potential run on the inside here. But as they start to get onto the straight here, let's see whether Uatilla has got the legs. You can see that they are just starting to edge ahead of the Fiat, but the Fiat's now probably starting to get back into the swing of things. With a little bit more time and a straight run, the Fiat should in theory start to open up the taps and get a little bit more headway. But it's back through another right-hander, and they are starting their run down to quite a sharp right-hander. There's a 777 who was caught out previously on their roof. C6 weaving in behind as they follow in behind Tolnen in the Fiat. But the Delage driven by Uatilla is starting to make some pretty good gains here, 1.3 seconds ahead as they head down to the right-hander. This is a 90-degree right-hander, so definitely going to be a key braking acceleration corner. And that is where the Delage shines in the acceleration department. You see the Fiat in the background now, a whopping 1.4 seconds behind. So considering the Fiat's straight line speed is its strong point, it's certainly struggling to keep up with the Delage driven by Uatilla as they approach the next right-hander. Uatilla's through, no problems there at all, but the Tolnen Fiat has just lost out there to the C6 and the Bugatti as they struggle to get the most out of the Fiat by the looks of it. Might be suffering from damage. Let's go back to Lemur and Walbert, who are now dancing toe-to-toe through the right-hander here, and Lemur in another Delage is going up against Walbert in the Sunbeam. And at the moment, Walbert is just holding their own here. Looks like Lazaro with the number 54 up ahead, probably watching their mirrors, wondering what's happening behind them, and it's a little bit of a battle here. These are so evenly matched that they are basically level pegging all the way down the straight. Hey Biles, good to see you. So Lemur and Walbert continue their battle into the town here. Going to be very cautious of the limited manoeuvring space here as they have the risk of hitting walls and so on. But it looks like Lemur is working their magic here as they ease up behind Lazaro's number 54, which is another Sunbeam. smoke billowing from the exhaust pipe of the Sunbeam there as they get under power. Number 12 driven by Walbert in the background, just appearing as they continue to join the fray. And it's turning into a bit of a three-way battle now between two Sunbeams and a Delage, with Lemur here in the number 1 Delage doing their best here. Looks like Walbert's starting to make some pretty good gains now, as they seem to have got a bit more acceleration out of the last corner, and are continuing their hunt. In the background there, Uatilla, who we saw earlier on, is starting to become a little bit more present. And as we go around the sharp right-hander here, the Moor are getting a little bit wider than they probably wanted to, but there's the Delage driven by Uatilla now in the fray, with Walbert under pressure here in the Sunbeam from another potential overtake by Uatilla. Up for 1 and 3 on the way. Nurmi out in front now, 36 seconds ahead of P2, Pelton. So the action continues to unfold here, with Walbert and Uatilla now side by side. Uatilla and the Delage on the right hand side making the move as they approach the next part of the built up area. But the Delage has eased on through there, no troubles at all from Uatilla as they work their way up to P9. And it's Walbert in the number 12 Sunbeam, which is finding themselves dropping down to P10. Looks like an issue there for Tolonen, slowing down for the pit lane here. But our battle continues between Lazzaro, Lemur, Uatilla and Walbert around P7 onwards. So a little bit of information then from the first round of the championship, which was held previously. And our championship leader, Nancy Heitinen, currently running in P5 in this race, 34 points with 50 laps in the last race. Started in 4th place, but quickly climbed their way to the fight for the lead. Nurmi, who's leading the pack here today, currently under no contention from other drivers right now. Quickly nip back to the action here. So Lazzaro's just been overtaken by Lemur, and Uatilla seems to be working up a little bit closer as well. So the Delages definitely seem to be making pretty good strides here against the Sunbeams. It seems to be quite the even fight. And you can see Uatilla here starting to close in now as they gear up for a potential overtake. Here it comes on the right hand side, weaves to the right, takes a little bit of a slingshot there, and it's now Uatilla who is starting to make some pretty good gains up against Lemur here. Of course, Lemur and Uatilla both in Delages, so it's going to be down to setup and driver skill as to who gets through the next overtake. Just nipping back to the results from the last race then. So Nurmi, who's leading the pack here today, is P2 following last race, 31 points, 50 laps, started in 3rd, climbed to the lead on lap 15, then dropped to 5th, but was able to rise again to his P2, so definitely some skill behind the wheel there, able to recover from mistakes. Vila Korakowski in P3 has 29 points to their name, starting in 13th last race, but climbed steadily to the podium by the end. They are, on the other hand, here in the second race here at Tour, are in P20, so definitely struggling to attain similar levels of success here. Alex Henry, 4th overall in the championship currently, 27 points, started in 14th last race, but dropped a few positions at first, was unable to climb again. And they are currently not here this weekend by the looks of it, so they will not be getting any points following today's racing. Rai Lazzaro, who is 9th place, we're currently watching them at the moment in the 54 car. They started last race in P16, dropped a little bit as well, but then gained positions little by little as the race went on, culminating with 26 points after 50 laps of racing. Let's take a little moment here to enjoy the battle between the number 12 Bugatti driven by, number 2 Bugatti driven by Heitinen and Jay Lindholm in the Village. Looks like the Bugatti just about 0.4 of a second behind as they fight their way down the straights. But Lippi, P6 in the championship overall, 25 points, started the last race in P20, but had a steady pace and ended up in 6th place overall. Currently running 17th here today. Looks like an opportunity for an overtake here, by the way, from number 2, as Heitinen closes in on the Delage. Through the corners, the Bugatti is a little bit lighter on its feet. It may have the opportunity here to close in a bit more. 0.3, 0.2 of a second. As the battle continues, let's get back to the results from the last race. So, Pereira, who is currently running 18th in this race today, finished the last race in P7, which means they're P7 in the championship overall. 24 points to the name, started in 15th, had a bad start but recovered nicely to P7 finish. Mantaja, 23 points to the name, P8 in the championship, and they're currently running in 15th here today, so opportunities afoot for more points for them. They started the last race in P11, gained a few positions at the start, but then dropped to 16th after 10 laps, but had a good recovery, so a bit of a mixed bag for them after the following race. Last race, sorry. So, P9 in the championship overall is Pekkanen, who is not here today. They finished in P9, started in P6, and had a bit of an issue, but were able to regain some positions during the race. Lumbago, who again I don't believe is on track today, is 10th in the championship overall. They started in 7th place last race, got into 3rd place mid-race, but then dropped a lot due to an issue later in the race with only 10 laps to go, so quite difficult to recover from that. McGears, who I believe is with us today, currently running P14 today. They are P11 in the championship overall with 20 points. Started last but gained steadily, so actually really good recovery from them in the last race. Darling, who is currently on track today and running in P12, is P12 in the championship overall, so on track to stay exactly where they are by the looks of it. Started in P8, gained a couple of positions, dropped 10 positions after 20 laps, but was able to recover a few before the end of the race. Haley Smith, who is again P16 today, is P13 in the championship overall. He started the last race in P10 and then had a bad start but gained positions pretty well to 5th. Then unfortunately crashed after 40 laps and dropped 10 positions, from where she was able to regain a couple of positions before the end of the race. So, Torsten Bealey, who I don't believe is on track today. No, they're not. They are P14 in the championship overall. Marcus Peltonen, who is running P2 today. He was actually P15 on our last race. They started from pole, 4th for the first position for the first 20 laps, but then had an accident and dropped to P17. So Peltonen didn't quite manage to finish the last race where they wanted to, but looked to be on track today to make amends for that unfortunate issue. Johnny Lindholm, currently P16 in the championship, is running in today's race in P4. The one we're watching right now as it happens. Started this race in 2nd and was fighting for the lead for the majority of the race, but had an accident just 8 laps to go and DNF'd. Visa Tolonen, who we were watching earlier on, they are currently P13. Started 9th, climbed little by little to 6th until had a crash after 20 laps, so common theme for some of these drivers to start well and then have success in the race, only to have an unfortunate accident and then have trouble recovering. Christian Dowager, P18, is currently running P20 today. They had 30, I think they DNF'd, but they started 18th, had a good start, after 10 laps dropped 8 positions. Ewan Tiller actually was P19 overall, had a DNF last race, started in 5th place and had steady pace as they seem to be doing today. Ooh, Peltonen's in the pits. And that's going to cost them a few positions. Engine starting. And now getting underway again. But they've lost a few positions there. Lemure just coming through, up to P7 now. And the question of Walbert. Can Walbert catch up before Peltonen gets fully up to speed? Closing in quickly is Walbert in the P12 Sunbeam. 2.5 seconds. They've got some. Once these cars get up to speed and they can maintain it, it takes a long time to recover that speed. And you can see here that that Sunbeam is absolutely rocketing along as they catch up with Peltonen here. And there's the overtake from Walbert as they move up to P8. Now Lazaro in the 54 has an opportunity in their Sunbeam to make a similar overtake. So interestingly, Kai Silverstone DNF'd on the last race. They're running P11 today. They're actually doing quite well earlier on, but seem to have dropped. They did start the race today in P2, but have since dropped further down the grid. But they started in 17th place last race, had an accident that forced them off the track where he teleported to the pits and continued the race, which is against the rules, so the DNF. I believe that might be the same for the 777 Bugatti today then, who also ended up on their roof and had to restart, and therefore may also be subject to a DNF under the rules. So that's a little bit of a background on the drivers from the previous race. Drivers that did have a DNF and got no prize credits included Ewan Tiller, Silverstone, Christian and Lindholm. There's also been some penalty fees awarded to Ryan Lazaro, who was awarded a 15,000 credit penalty for forcing a competitor off the track. Zan Darling also received the same penalty for the same reason. Kai Silverstone received a 10,000 credit penalty for punching a competitor off the track. Haley Smith received 15,000 penalty for forcing a competitor off the track, and then Anssi Haitanen received a 10,000 credit penalty for punting a competitor off the track. So that's a bit about the cars. We've talked about the track and the results in the previous race. Let's go back to the action now as we are on the 5th lap of the race. Almost approaching a third of the way through the race duration today. It looks like Montanage has just been in the pits. I can't tell if this is due to damage-related reasons or whether this is simply refueling potentially or some other issue. But Nurmi definitely dominating here today. 4.6 laps underway with a plus 1 minute gap and 16 seconds to the next contender, which is Rosen in the Delage. Seems like actually less of the Fiat drivers in the top spots, despite the predictions of the briefing notes. And it's nice to see we've got a Bugatti in P3, a Sunbeam in P4, a Delage in P2, and a Fiat in P1. So a good mixture of competitors here. P5 to P7 is all Delage 2LCVs, so they definitely seem to be a good choice of car here, combined with their I believe they have the good reliability. No, I stand corrected. The Delage is the one with some reliability issues on the engine compartment. It's a Sunbeam, which is the solid performer from a reliability point of view. But Nurmi is definitely on the way. Let's go back to P5 here, where we join Johnny Lindholm and the number 6, or sorry, the P6 driver, Attila, who's 0.5 of a second behind. Both driving Delages, but Attila seems to be bringing some pretty consistent pace here to the race today, and we've seen them putting some really good pressure on the other drivers. Nice clean overtakes as they slide the cars through the corners here. Ooh, looks like Lindholm going a little bit off track there. It's probably going to allow Attila to take advantage of that mistake. I imagine he'll have to lift off a little bit there, and there's Attila coming through on the left-hand side as they start to make some pretty good gains here in the blue and white Delage. But next up is that sharp right-hander, 90 degrees to the right. We have plenty of opportunity to go flying off. Attila heading up to that right-hander just now. Number 12, driven by Mikla, up ahead, now under pressure. Only 1.7 seconds separating them from the Delage from by Attila, and the acceleration from the Delage, certainly something to watch out for if you're a Sunbeam driver. 1.3 seconds now. Really good exit from the corner there for Attila as they start to eat away at the lead, and actually also open up a pretty substantial gap to Lindholm there, with a 2.7 second gap between the two of them. See now, Attila starting to get a little bit closer to Mikla up ahead. Not a significant amount of slipstream advantage here being achieved just at this moment in time. But let's maintain our gaze over Attila here as they start to close in now, 0.6 of a second. And there will be a little more of a twisty section coming up ahead, which may afford Attila an opportunity to overtake. So come up to another residential area here. 0.5 of a second. Under the bridge they go, starting to ease off the throttle as they navigate the twisty sections. Delage really starting to eat away at the leads of the Sunbeam here. You can see the speed that they are able to carry through the corners, and acceleration definitely working in their favour as they make this overtake on Mikla look very easy. And that takes Attila up to P4 in the 6th lap of the race here at the 1923 Grand Prix and Tour. Meanwhile, down in P15 we have Muntajar and Lippi, with Muntajar just having got up to P15 and working their way away from Lippi at the moment. It seems to be opening a pretty significant gap already. So Attila's reign of success continues as they are now up to P4. They've got a 7.7 second gap to Heitinen in the Type 32 Bugatti, and that was 8 seconds a few moments ago, so definitely starting to eat away into yet another driver's lead. So they may yet find their way up to the podium, which is a pretty strong start considering they started this race down the grid a little bit further. Just trying to spot them in the starting line. So yeah, P19 starts for Attila, and they're already up to P3. So someone's had a return to pits. Yeah, so Heitinen has had to return to pits there. sure if that was due to a crash or not, but they are, under the current rules, potentially at risk of a DNF now. So, Jay Lamour in the pits, allowing Lazzaro up to P8, having just overtaken Lindholm. Some of the drivers like Grosjean still underway with the 777 Bugatti, but having been on their roof and having to re-teleport to the pits, that may mean that they're under a DNF position despite continuing. But Ursula onto the podium, despite starting basically at the back of the grid, has had a very fortunate run of success so far, and has a strong opportunity here to get themselves a solid podium finish here at Tour. But they have a 28.5 second gap to Rosen, and Rosen's also in a delage, so no real significant difference in the cars there, which may allow Ursula to start closing that gap. But we'll keep a close eye on progress. There is a lot of racing to go, plenty of opportunities for the likes of Nurmi and Rosen to have an accident. Not that we're wishing that on them. But likewise, Ursula will have to keep their nose very clean to secure this podium. I imagine they desperately want. So pit stops so far, we've had Peltonen with one pit stop, Heitinen with another pit stop, Tolonen has had one pit stop, Federico Juan Quintero Diaz is on one pit stop as well, and Lenzenjar also has had one pit stop, and so has Christian Gauger. Drivers a little bit more spaced out now, but looks to be a little bit of a battle potentially developing between Lazzaro and Lindholm as Lindholm starts to close in a little bit more. Lazzaro in the sunbeam by the looks of it has a little bit of delage pressure. The delage definitely seems to have slightly the upper hand on the sunbeams, particularly with acceleration, but that's where the reliability of the sunbeam might come in clutch as the race continues. But at the moment Lindholm is only 0.4 of a second behind, and the acceleration from the delage is definitely going to be helping out here with the overtake, which is about to be delivered by Lindholm on the left hand side, going on the long wide side of the corner. But now Lazzaro is starting to get up to speed. It's going to be a question of whether they can get a little bit more of that top end speed working in their favour. So Nurmi approaching the end of the lap by the looks of it. Track conditions remain pretty solid here with 94% track grip, 22 degrees in the air, track temperature of 36. And Nurmi absolutely flying here in the Fiat. Again, that supercharged engine definitely affording the Fiat drivers a lot more grunt to their right foot, but equally very thirsty in the fuel economy department. Down into the tightest corner and back onto the throttle. Looks like Tolonin and Lemur are starting to close in on each other again, with Lemur starting to ease up from behind. The twisting section definitely favouring the Lemur special. Oh, and a bit of a honk as I go past there. The large 2LCV just easing past the Fiat driven by Tolonin actually. So yeah, definitely the large seems to have the advantage in certain situations. A little bit of a honk of the horn lets Tolonin know what's just about to happen. Haley Smith in P14 currently having a potential bit of contention with Munjar, catching a little bit of the rear end as it slips out there, and number 3 gets underway again. Haley of course driving the only example of the A22 on the track at the moment. But they continue their little bit of a battle. Looks like Haley's losing out here, 2 seconds behind now, and struggling to maintain pace. Meanwhile, the likes of the number 12 Sunbeam, driven by Mikkola, is going to be a little bit aware of Peltonen's advance in P5. Peltonen, of course, driving the Fiat, which is slated to be one of the strongest contenders here. And you can see the speed advantage that the Fiat is bringing. Acceleration-wise, I'm not sure who gets the advantage here. Lots of smoke coming out of the Sunbeam's exhaust though on the full acceleration. But it looks like the Sunbeam gets up to speed a lot more quickly than the Fiat. And that's afforded Mikkola a little bit of breathing space from Peltonen's Fiat as a 2-second gap opens up. Let's go back to P7 though with Walbert and Lindholm. The fight is definitely on between these two, and the Delage and its acceleration is probably going to make light work of the overtake, which is about to happen if I'm reading the situation correctly. Despite the Sunbeam smoke screen, looks like Lindholm's managing to get up to speed here. That being said, actually, the acceleration difference isn't that substantial between these two cars. Lindholm remains between 0.6, 0.7 or a second behind. But here it comes, up to speed now, and Lindholm pulls over to the right hand side to execute the overtake as they come down the right hander here on the inside. And the ball is very much back in Walbert's court now, the number 12 Sunbeam, as they come past the start-finish line. The question now is, will Walbert's Sunbeam get up to speed at the upper end of the spectrum and deliver an opportunity for a repeat overtake? seems to be going in their direction. 0.1 of a second now as they start to get closer. You can see from the driver's point of view here, they're just easing past as the front wheel of Lindholm's Delage actually starts to make more of an appearance as they fight back and forth position here in P7, P6. And long may the battle continue between Lindholm and Walbert. At the moment though, Walbert seems to be losing out again. Still, but I believe they are approaching, if I can find correctly, yes they are not quite there yet, but they're going to be coming up to the town soon, which has got that very tricky right-hander, and that might be an opportunity for Walbert to make up some ground again, depending on the braking zones and how that plays out for these two drivers. But seems to be quite an interesting profile of acceleration between these two cars. The Delage definitely getting off out of the gates a little bit earlier. Sunbeam potentially coming back midway through the spectrum. At the very top end, it seems like the Delage seems to have slight edge over Sunbeam. That being said, it could be some driver strategies in order to maintain the integrity of their engines and gearboxes that might be coming into play here. But they're about to get into that braking zone, and it's round the right-hander and then heavy on the brakes for the tight right-hander that's coming up next. Getting very slow indeed. Back on the power, you can see Lindholm's Delage up ahead is a full 4 seconds ahead now, so looks like Lindholm managed to make the most out of that. Let's go to P9 though with J. Lemur and Heitinen in the Bugatti as the Bugatti shoots down the outside using its top speed advantage here. And they are about to approach a similar part of the track. Let's see who's better on the brakes. Go to this camera here, it's a little bit easy to see what's happening. My camera's got a little bit confused here. Number 2 Bugatti through without issue, but now back on the power. And J. Lemur getting any closer. Seems to be getting up to speed a little bit quicker than the Bugatti, and there's less than a second between the two of them now. Slipstream advantage as well, working in the favour of J. Lemur, as they are now 0.4 of a second, and overtake potential becomes a real factor. See, they have a good bit of overspeed here, but they're approaching some of the corners, so maybe thinking carefully about the appropriateness of when to make that move. But they remain only 0.4 of a second behind Heitinen. Sliding it through the corner, losing out a little bit of speed there potentially from J. Miller's point of view. Gap opening back up to about a second as they attempt to navigate these twisty corners. This is where the Bugatti actually has the advantage in a nimble nature. That being said, it is a little bit lighter on its feet in the high speed corners, which means it is a little bit more of a handful to control. I think it generates a bit of lift on the shape of its body, which probably helps it have a bit of a top speed advantage, but may make it a little bit more challenging in some of those high speed corners if the car becomes a little bit light on its feet. That being said, Heitinen is now breaking away from Lemur with a 1.5 second gap opening between the two of them, and it's very much going to be down to Lemur now to try and close that gap if they can at all. They are, however, in the Delage, which is going to have the advantage in that acceleration, and where are they now? So straight run down to the 90-degree right-hander, and that might be where the Delage from Lemur can take advantage of that acceleration to open up the gap again. And Lemur has managed to make a really great run of the last couple of corners and is now absolutely hammering down behind Bugatti, driven by Heitinen. The right-hander that's coming up is a nice, tight 90-degree corner. That's going to put the advantage back into Lemur's hands as they think about pulling out to the right side and making an overtake here into the braking zone. But let's see what they can make of the situation. Their acceleration should definitely help the next phase, though, which is trying to get the power down, and as they start to roll up through the gears, it's Lemur who is closing in slowly. 0.3 of a second. Relatively short straight this one up into the next braking zone, so it looks like Lemur is now throwing it down the right hand side, eases through. The Bugatti now slips in behind, looking for an opportunity to return the favour. 0.3 of a second. The Delage is still picking up speed here, and the gap opens just a touch as they head down to the next town. .1 of a second. Bugatti switches to the right hand side for the overtake. Manages to sweep on through, but they are now approaching another quite twisty section of track, and this might be where Lemur's opportunity will reveal itself as they come back into the town. Let's go to the driver's point of view. You see the spectators there on the side of the track. No safety precautions whatsoever, of course. Shed of speed here as they come through the town without getting too close to the car in front. Bugatti sliding through the corner there with a little bit more speed, and Lemur is now on the back foot slightly as they try to accelerate, keep up with Heitinen's Bugatti, but a 1 second gap sits between the two of them. I don't think the fight is completely over yet, as Lemur manages to maintain some aggression here. Takes a very aggressive line down the inside to the hairpin, and does manage to make a little bit of a hash job of that for Bugatti to get away again, but thankfully no contact between the two drivers as a result of that. I think Lemur just really pushing their luck there with the braking point. But meanwhile, let's go back to P3, where Peltonen is now battling with Uatilla. And it's Peltonen who's managed to get through in the Fiat. And Uatilla is down to P4, despite having been on P3 for a short while there. Look at this, Peltonen absolutely hammering along at almost 200 kilometers an hour, 201 there for a brief moment. Meanwhile, Uatilla can manage a meagre 180 or so. So, absolutely flying here in the Fiat. heading into the town section. Easing off that speed now down to sub 100 kilometers an hour. This is where Attila might be able to use the Delage's acceleration to catch up a little bit. You can see Attila starting to close, almost approaching a second gap again. Still 1.1 seconds behind at the moment, and struggling to make significant gains onto the Fiat. But the only remaining Delage now is Paul van Rosen in P2. They are 10 seconds ahead of Peltonen though. That will see them struggle against the pace that Peltonen is bringing. We're approximately halfway through the race now at this stage, and I am uncertain as to how much fuel Peltonen will need to carry them through. Will they need to pit stop for fuel later in the race? It's unclear. Or will they have enough to go to the full race distance, given that the Fiat has a significantly higher fuel consumption at approximately over 3 times, if not almost 4 times the race lane cars. So Nurmi on the 8th lap here. Track conditions remain the same. No pit stops from the top 2 at the moment, although Marcus Peltonen has had 1 pit stop and still remains in P3, which is impressive in its own right. They are starting to get a little bit closer now to Rosen. They are sub 8 seconds, whereas a few moments ago that was around 10 seconds of gap. The Fiat speed here is just unmatched by any of the other cars on the track, so not surprised to see the Fiat making inroads here. As I mentioned though, heating issues for Fiat may be a cause for concern. Attila hanging in as much as they possibly can, but still remaining just that 1.1 second to 1.2 second gap behind. So as I mentioned earlier on, the Fiat's engine can be quite unreliable, and its cooling is potentially not enough to cover the grunt that this car has to deliver. The gearbox also not being the strongest either may mean that these guys are going to make some pretty significant inroads early on in the race, but do run the risk of potentially finding themselves in a sticky situation with mechanical issues rearing their head later in the race. As I mentioned, we are now over halfway through the race, so let's see if the drivers can get their Fiats to the end of the race in one piece without a significant issue from the overheating point of view. Marcus Peltonen now 5.3 seconds behind, so Paul van Rosen is going to be watching that split with keen interest, I'm sure, as they become very aware that a Fiat is bearing down on them. Meanwhile, Uatilla's Delage is getting a little bit left behind by the likes of Marcus Beltner's Fiat. And there's the overtake from, I wasn't expecting it to happen that quickly, but Paul Van Rosen is now down to P3 as another Fiat joins the top spots with Nurmi and Pelton in both of the Fiats. The question now is, can Uatilla overtake Paul Van Rosen to take third place? So into the tight right-hander here, Uatilla getting awfully close behind Paul Van Rosen's Delage. Uatilla in the blue and white here with Paul Van Rosen in the silver. There's a 0.7 second gap as they exit the hairpin. Of course, with both drivers in the same car, the acceleration benefit of the Delage is offset. That being said though, what does remain is the slipstream advantage that Uatilla is currently taking advantage of, closing the gap to 0.4 of a second, and setting themselves up here for a potential overtake. 169, 170 kilometers an hour as they come past the start-finish straight. It's the blue and white Delage driven by Uatilla. It's 0.2 seconds. It pulls out to the left-hand side. And from Uatilla's point of view, you can see that they are just sweeping on past there as they make that look very easy indeed. Now the two Delages run side by side down the straight as they make the long procession down to the next town. Second remains between these two drivers. It's going to be an exciting run down. They're about 2/3 of the way down this straight as they come down to one of the trickiest corners on this track. And it's actually Paul Van Rosen who's actually closing in again now. 0.2 of a second. That was previously 0.3. So somehow they've managed to sneak a little bit of extra speed out of the Delage. And the gap does not remain as steady as Uatilla would hopefully wish to see. See from Paul Van Rosen's point of view here. I mean, I'm not sure why they're not taking advantage of the slipstream that's on offer here from Uatilla. But they're leaving a little bit of performance on the table here, if I'm being completely honest. Easing over to the left-hand side, preparing for the corner entry. Maybe they didn't want to have the positions flipped until after this corner. A slight bit of wheel spin from Uatilla there, but Paul Van Rosen is 0.2 seconds behind and not quite catching up with Uatilla in the way that they might wish to see. It's going to leave Paul Van Rosen with a bit of a disadvantage here as they won't necessarily have access to the slipstream advantage afforded by Uatilla in front. And the gap opens to 1.3 seconds as they climb a bit of an incline here. down here in P11 though. We've got big ears in the C6. They were briefly alongside Jamie Moore. Lazaro in the pits, however. Let's go back to you, Attila, who is on the podium with a P3. And Paul van Rosen, 2.3 seconds behind now. So not quite managing to keep up with you, Attila's pace. Oh, there's a car on the left-hand side of the track. That's Peltonen. Peltonen seems to be in difficulty. I don't know if they're experiencing some of the aforementioned reliability issues that we were talking about, but Peltonen's off to the side of the track in P4 and losing out quite significantly here to the likes of Attila, who's now up to P2. Engine is running, so not entirely sure what the issue is. It might be a gearbox issue for Marcus Peltonen. There's Nicola in the number 12 Sunbeam coming through to P4. And coming up from behind is Jay Lindholm, followed by S. Walbert. Oh, okay, so Marcus Peltonen's back underway. Maybe they were just letting the engine cool down. But they are now back on their under their own power, and the race continues. So maybe that explains it. They were pushing that Fiat just a little bit too hard, and it's had a little bit of an overheating issue potentially. Might be a question for after the race. Weather conditions remain stable here, with a few clouds in the sky, but otherwise blue. No sign of rain that we saw earlier on, and that might keep things a little bit more stable for the drivers as they will be used to the dry track. And in changing conditions right now will probably be quite a change in braking points and so on. So pretty quite an unwelcome change if there was one. I can actually say the words. So quite significant gaps opening here as we just start lap 10 with Nurmi just having crossed the line. Oh, look at this, Nurmi's into the pits. And they are probably stopping for fuel or engine cooling. But they have a whole minute and 50 seconds before the likes of Attila and P2 get anywhere closer to them. So I imagine they'll be setting themselves up for a topping off of the tank. And that should set them up for a good strong finish to the race. Nurmi definitely dominant performance here today. Best lap time for Nurmi is an 8:48.678, which is by a country mile the fastest lap of the race. And as they finish their pit stop and get back underway, they remain in P1 by a good margin. So Tolonen, who's currently in P15, stopped at the same time as Nurmi. But definitely a significant gap in positions between these two drivers. Meanwhile though, Muntinjar in P17 and the likes of Darling. Separated by a mere 1.2 seconds. So with the 10th lap underway here at Tour, we have quite a spread of cars. We've got Uatilla in the pit lane. They'd worked themselves up to P2, but now find themselves in the pits. And I believe they should be getting their way, getting themselves underway shortly. They had a great run of luck getting back up to P2, considering where they started, which is near the back of the grid. But Paul van Rosen is back up to P2 now, following Uatilla's trip to the pits. And there comes Mikola in the Sunbeam in number 12. And Jay Lindholm. And I assume Peltonen in the Fiat will be next up. There we go. Uatilla spending a bit more time in the pits than potentially I might be expecting. I don't know if that's a retirement or not. Uatilla's hard work being a little bit undone now as they find themselves back in P7. There's quite a lengthy pit stop here for Uatilla. I'm assuming this is intentional. It does seem to be going on for quite some time. I don't know if they're repairing damage of some sort. Oh, they're underway again. That was quite a lengthy pit stop. They've cost themselves quite a few positions as they went down from P2 to P7. But Uatilla is back on the run, and if they can continue the pace they were delivering pre-pit stop, we may yet see them back on the podium. So Paul van Rosen now takes the second spot in the race with a nice healthy gap to P3, which is number 12 Sunbeam driven by Mikola. 41 seconds separating these two. Darling though and Muntinjar, P17 and 18. The closest two on the track right now with only a second between the two of them in the number 6 Bugatti. Muntinjar's Large by the looks of it. Yes, it is, yeah. So, Michael Peltonen back underway in the mighty Fiat. P4 currently. They were going absolutely 90 of the dozen before having to pull over to the side of the track for a bit of a cool off, I think it was. Let's see if they are on track to catch up with P12, sorry P3, which is the number 12 Mikola Sunbeam. Mike Darling starting to break away from Mountain Jar. At this stage of the race, it's definitely a little bit more separated. Let's take a quick look at people's best lap times. So, as I mentioned earlier on, Nurmi with an 8:48.678 is significantly ahead of the field. Marcus Peltonen with an 8:54.209 is in the other Fiat. That kind of makes sense. Carl Uatila, though, in a Delage, cracked the 8:59.3 kind of territory with the Delage, which is great to see. That's pretty close to the Fiat, despite the difference in top speed advantage there. Meanwhile, most of the drivers are plus 9 minutes. So yeah, Paul Uatila Carrie Uatila, I don't know where Paul came from, has definitely managed to get a lot of performance out of the Delage today. Approaching, if not bettering, some of the Fiat drivers on the grid, and it'll be interesting to see if Uatila can work their way back up the pack. Weather conditions seem to be changing a little bit now, with the blue sky being replaced by a little bit more of an overcast scene. I don't know if that means that we have potential weather shifts and rain on the way. But I believe scattered clouds are on the menu for the weather as we progress through the remaining half of this race here at the 1923 Grand Prix Tour. Marcus Peltonen 4 seconds behind Mikkola. That gap closing quite quickly as the top speed advantage here from Fiat eats away at that Sunbeam's advantage. And as they come down to this hard braking zone, will Marcus Peltonen be able to eat into this gap anymore? .8 seconds, 2.7, 2.6. So Marcus definitely carried a bit more speed through there, and the acceleration seems to be in the favour of the Fiat. As this gap gets ever smaller, and Mikkola will be keeping an eye on this timing gap, I'm sure, knowing that the impending overtake is coming, but they are on the short gap now between the right-hander they've just been through and the twisty section with the hairpin, and it will be really down to Mikkola to make the most of these corners to see if they can keep ahead of the advances of Marcus Peltonen in the Fiat at the moment. But that gap is ever tightening, and I don't believe there'll be enough time before they get to the next corner before this Fiat will be rocketing alongside. And here it comes, no stopping that pace advantage from the Fiat there as they head down to the town. Let's see if the Sunbeam can make it back in the corner zone. More importantly, if the Fiats are having to pull over for overheating issues and so on, that may mean that the Sunbeams don't have to worry about these momentary losses of position, because they may find it's delivered back to them on silver platter. A few laps to go. So, P14, Haley Smith in the A22 is fighting off Tolonen in another Fiat. This time, however, the Fiat hasn't quite managed to get up to speed yet, and Haley Smith is managing to hold their own. Meanwhile, the battle between Mantinjar and the Bugatti continues. These two have been going hammer and tong for a few laps now. And it's the Bugatti, number 6, driven by Darling, which has managed to sneak on through once again. Now under speed, it's the Darling number 6 Bugatti which breaks away with ease from Mantinjar's Delage. Feels like Peltonen has opened up a 6-second gap to Mikkola already. And it's Lindholm in the pits this time, which will undoubtedly allow Walbert and Uatila to catch up. Uatila just having navigated through the hairpin. The weather seems to be brightening up at the moment. Uatila making some pretty good advances at the moment. Let's take a look at the last lap time for Uatila, who put down an 8:59.3 last lap, which is better than, sorry, I stand mistaken, an 11:30 on the last lap, so actually a bit slower. For comparison, Nurmi did a 10:14, Paul Rosen did a 9:09, which is their best, well, almost their best lap of the race. Their best lap was 9 minutes 9 seconds 0.172, and the last lap was 9 minutes 9 seconds 0.548. But it's Marcus Peltonen on the last lap setting an 8:49.483, which is the second fastest lap of the race, and also their fastest lap of their race. Haley Smith and Tolonen back at it again, with Tolonen's Fiat now starting to eat into the A22's advantage here, with the top speed advantage on Fiat's side, 0.3 of a second. Looks like they're going to be overtaking momentarily. Having second thoughts by the looks of it. Come through the corners, you can see the A22 slipping and sliding. Might be where the advantage of the A22 comes in, having a bit more of a nimble ability through the corners. Heitinen's turn in the Bugatti number 2 to pit now, dropping them down to 9th place. Pit stop's being quite a significant loss of time and positions here, so there's Walbert though in the number 12 Sunbeam P5 with Jay Lindholm 2.7 seconds behind, but ever present. Down here in P17, Mantinjar is under pressure now from Lippi. As Lippi closes the gap, and behind them, I believe that's our friend the 777 Grosjean. But Mantinjar has opened up the gap again to 1.1 seconds. Back to Walbert in P5, the number 12 Sunbeam, followed by Lindholm's Delage in silver. The gap closing now to 1.2 seconds as Lindholm's pressing home the advantage of the Delage. Side by side as Lindholm and Walbert battle. This time it's Lindholm's Delage which eases on through on the left hand side. And now Walbert's on the back foot. Might consider dropping into the slipstream but decides against it. Approach the braking zone for the hard right-hander. This is where the Sunbeam might struggle against the Delage's acceleration, but who's going to be on the brakes earlier? Delage gets a nice cleaner line through the corner there. Sunbeam back on the power, smoke billowing from the exhaust pipe as they try and get the power down. It looks like Walbert is just starting to ease back as they lose a little bit of pace compared to the Delage's acceleration. Meanwhile, Nurmi on the 12th lap of the race. Weather conditions remaining stable here at Tour. Quite a big gap opened up there between Lindholm and Walbert, 2.2 seconds. Fairly significant advantage there from the Delage's point of view. So Paul van Rosen in the Delage in P2 currently. Definitely getting the most out of the Delage that we've seen for the duration of the race. Their best lap's 9:09 compared to Uatilla's 8:59. But the consistency seems to be there on their behalf. So whilst they may not have the fastest lap time, they are definitely putting in some pretty consistent times, and therefore holding their own up here with the Fiats driven by Nurmi and Peltonen. Honking of the horn. So Paul Van Rosen honking their horn as they come up behind what looks like Hayley Smith. Yep, that's Hayley. And Paul Van Rosen continues the pace here. Mountain Jar's in the pits at the moment. Likely means their battle with Hayley Smith is over for the time being. Back to Lindholm in P5. Good 7 seconds ahead of Walbert at the moment. Those two were quite close earlier on. At the moment it's Darling in the Bugatti number 6 versus Tolonen in the Fiat, where our next bit of action may come from. 163 kilometers an hour, sorry, for the Bugatti, and Tolonen struggling there a little bit in the Fiat to get the same pace, despite other drivers managing to get a little bit more oomph out of that. However, the name that I struggle to pronounce the most, Korakowski and Simpson, are also switching up the positions a little bit here. Nice to see a C6, but oh, here comes the rain! And a sudden shift from blue skies to wet weather may shake things up a little bit here at Tour. So, drivers' braking points will now be different. Grip levels will be different. Visibility might be different. Interestingly, the clouds haven't changed to match the weather just yet. From the driver's point of view, you can see the tyres now glistening a little bit. Probably going to have to brake a little bit earlier for some of these corners as they come round the hairpin. Let's see whether this is going to change up the running order at all. Some of the drivers might get a little bit more performance out of their cars in the wet than others. I can only imagine that with those thin tyres in the wet weather, the little amount of grip you were getting will be severely diminished. Weather starting to worsen now with pooling water on the tracks and a bit more spray kicking up from behind the back of the cars. There goes Kodakowski through start-finish straight. From Darling's point of view here, you can see the spray kicking up from the cars in front. Ooh, and Darling slowing down. I thought there was engine trouble for a second there, but it was just slowing down for the corner. Let's see if the wet weather's had any issues with... Ooh, look at that, yeah. Perhaps a little bit of a grip issue there for the number 6 Bugatti. Is that Nurmi? That's the question. No, there's Nurmi, so that must mean that was Peltonen. Yes, it is. So, third place, Peltonen. Bit of traffic in their midst at the moment, and with the worsening weather conditions, you can see the sky really starting to darken now. Thunderstorm may be on our hands on the 12th lap. And you can see the speed advantage here that Peltonen is bringing in the Fiat compared to the number 6 Bugatti, just easing on past there. Puddles now forming on the track. So, Marcus Peltonen only 3.3 seconds behind Paul van Rosen at the moment, and this may be where the next bit of action, the battle unfolds. You hear the thunder starting to roll in a little bit now. It's definitely going to be a concern for some of the drivers as they struggle with the changing weather conditions, especially in some of these faster corners now. When there's standing water on the track, there's going to be certainly quite significant levels of pooling water here in the towns. 2 seconds of a gap between Marcus Peltonen and the Delage driven by Paul van Rosen. The last of the Delage is to hold back a Fiat. Another crack of thunder in the background. Paul van Rosen up ahead, who's caught up behind Tolonen, by the looks of it. Yeah. Here's Paul van Rosen, coming up to the next braking zone, the hard right-hand hairpin. And it's Marcus Peltonen in the Fiat in the background, who's the one that we need to be watching, because they are now sub 2 seconds of a gap to Paul van Rosen. Paul managing to make the overtake now on the number 9, driven by Tolonen. It's now Marcus Peltonen's turn to catch up. An interesting feature of the CVR is their ability to run I guess a credits-based system for the championship, where drivers can buy and sell cars. You get fined for issues on the track, like penalties and so on. So an interesting dynamic to add into the racing here at CVR. And I wonder if certain drivers employ different strategies to pick the best car for certain rounds. At the moment though, Marcus Peltonen eases into that 1 second territory, closing into Paul van Rosen's Delage, and the undeniable advantage of the top speed of the Fiat is playing a significant factor here, though from the onboard with Marcus Peltonen you can see that that spray makes it quite tricky to judge exactly where the car in front actually is. And they're doing their best here to get as much slipstream as they possibly can. I don't think it will be far off witnessing of the overtake between Marcus Peltonen. He's now sub 0.5 of a second. It's amazing actually just how much grunt the Delage must have to hold up against this supercharged Fiat. But the speed differential is undeniable, and the overtake is very much happening now as they approach. Well, let's see how far off the corner they are, because that's going to be a critical deciding factor for this particular juncture of the race. Peltonen is through though for the time being, but they are approaching one of the trickier corners, and with the weather conditions it'll be interesting to see if Paul van Rosen can take advantage of this to gain any time back. sure we've seen any of the drivers come through here yet with the new weather conditions. Might mean they need to brake a little bit earlier. When you have a competitor breathing down your neck, it's something you definitely want to try and time just right. And here they go, through the first of the two corners. Let's go to Paul van Rosen's point of view. Lots of standing water on the inside edge of the corners there. Big puddle up ahead. The sky seems to be brightening up a bit though, so I wonder if the rain's been easing off. If it carries on as it is, it's going to get very wet out there on the track. It's already pooling quite significant amounts of water on either side of the track. Meanwhile, Paul van Rosen's still holding on to the likes of Marcus Pelton, but the gap is now approaching just about to be 1 second. And the Twisty section is coming up. Let's see if Paul van Rosen can use the delage in the corners to catch up at all. Good twisty section. Paul van Rosen 1.6 seconds down at the moment compared to Marcus Pelton. That gap isn't getting any smaller just yet. It seems that the Fiat driven by Marcus Pelton can get through here without too much of an issue. Seconds between the two at the moment. Seems like the battle between Paul van Rosen and Marcus Pelton is over for the time being, with the Fiat just outpowering the delage overall, and not losing out too much in the corners either, so doesn't leave a lot of room for the delage to make a comeback in those circumstances. And Paul van Rosen clipping a little bit of the grass there, which may have contributed to a little bit of loss of time there. Now 3.2 seconds gap between those two. Meanwhile, we've got Kai Severston in the pits, Mantinger in the pits, Grosjean in the pits, and that may be a few DNFs for some of the drivers here at Tour. Let's go back, however, to where the action currently sits, with Albert and Uatilla, these two fighting once again, as Uatilla has managed to close the gap and is starting to gain ground on the Sunbeam. Uatilla, of course, managing to have got some pretty good gains in the corners. Hey Andrew, good to see you. But Uatilla starting to close in on Albert now. The Sunbeam, as reliable as it may be, seems to lose out a little bit to the delage in some of these corners, and Uatilla knows exactly how to get the most out of the delage as it sweeps down the left-hand side to overtake Albert by a good margin. Uatilla is up to P6 with a 22-second gap to Lindholm. And with a good few laps to go, Uatilla may be on track here for another approach to the podium. The likes of Mikkola has not had a pits, and neither has Paul van Rosen. They're one of the few drivers to have not had a pit stop just yet. Johnny Lindholm hasn't either. Neither is Uatilla or Walbert. Well, actually, that's interesting because Uatilla was in the pits, so why is it not telling me that they've had a pit stop? Interesting. But now Uatilla and Lindholm. Well, actually, no, sorry, that is overtaking one of the back markers, I believe. Uatilla in the Delage here, rocketing along the straight, 156 kilometres an hour. The rain's still coming down, although the skies have cleared up a little bit. That sun may now start to help with visibility. If it stops raining, it may also help burn off some of the water on the track and allow drivers to get back to dry conditions. But at the moment, it's still a very wet track here at Tour. Meanwhile, out in front, the Fiat driven by Nurmi continues to remain dominant here with a 2 minutes and 25 second gap to P2. Marcus Pelton in the next Fiat, with 2 Fiats in the top spots. Leaves Paul van Rosen as the only other Delage to be on the podium right now. Although Lindholm and Uatilla are both in Delages. Ooh, mistake from Nurmi. Not that's going to make a huge amount of difference to their gap, but misjudged the braking point there through the right-hander and almost went into a wall. So Paul van Rosen back in the Delage, 9.4 seconds behind Marcus Pelton, a whole minute ahead of Mikkola though. But it will be interesting to see whether the pit stops have any impact on the remaining part of the race. I'm not sure exactly. It kind of mixed signals here from the live tracking data as to who's actually had a pit stop and who hasn't. It's telling me that Nurmi and Pelton have. Even though I'm sure I saw Uatilla in the pit stops, it's not actually showing that they have had a pit stop yet. Definitely brightened up at the moment, but still wet on the track. I think the rain has almost eased off completely now, but still remains a little bit soggy here. The sky is definitely blue, but the rain continues, so I'm not sure the sky and the weather have quite got themselves lined up at the moment. Northern Rosen now through the corner where we saw Nurmi almost go off. Lots of standing water in that corner. I wonder if that's what caused Nurmi to have a little bit of a heart in mouth moment heading towards the wall. At 14, almost finished now, with Nurmi 13.6 laps through. Hayley Smith here in the A22 being chased down by the likes of Darling in a Bugatti, and the Bugatti making some pretty significant inroads here. A honk of the horn from Bugatti as it flies on through on the left hand side. This comical little horn. That puts Hayley Smith down to P15. It's just now approaching the right-hander with the standing water. Being very cautious there as they roll onto the throttle. So far the weather hasn't really caught anyone out too bad. So, the number 12, driven by Mikkola, is on track at the moment with P13, driven by Tollen. So these guys aren't fighting for position, but they're fighting nonetheless. Jay Lindholm is 10 seconds behind Mikkola at the moment. We'll see if that gap closes over the course of the next few laps. But if I imagine, if we go for the onboard view from Tollen's point of view, you can see the spray coming up from Mikkola's sunbeam up ahead. Jay Lindholm now only 7.6 seconds behind Mikkola, so he's definitely making some inroads here as they come through the twisty section in the delage. You see up ahead, Mikkola. So Lindholm has to get past the lapped driver, Tollen, before they can approach Mikkola, but they're now only 7.4 seconds behind, so edging closer. Mikkola, of course, 1 minute 10 behind the podium third place holder, P. Rosen. Let's see how quick Lindholm can close this gap. There's There's Lindholm through the right-hander and making some pretty significant gains as he shoots past Tolonen. And 6.5 seconds, so took a good chunk out of that gap to Mikkola, as Mikkola's Sunbeam can't seem to fend off the likes of Lindholm's Solage. So it looks like the rain has finally stopped and the track is starting to dry out. The rain's not fully stopped yet, but it's just kind of spitting now. And the track might be starting to get a little bit less damp. Getting a little bit darker though by the looks of it. Into the town Lindholm goes, 5.6 seconds behind the target of Mikkola. See the standing water inside of the track now, narrowing the corridor that you can get through here. And up ahead you can see the smoke screen from the Sunbeam, telling Lindholm they are starting to get close to their target. 4.2 seconds in it now. And the 15th lap of the race is where we are right now. 3.9 seconds to go as we come down to the right-hander. Just getting past one of the back markers there. That might be Pereira. Yes, it is. And now Lindholm is so close to the smoke screen from the Sunbeam ahead that they can almost smell it now. 3.6 seconds to go. And we'll see if Lindholm can bring this one home. So McGears has just had a little bit of damage, I'm told. So it might be a little bit of contact with the wall. They are back underway. JC Limor as well, catching a little bit of damage, I'm told. Here we go, here's Mikkola in P4, only 3 seconds ahead of Lindholm, who is starting to really bear down on P4. Undoubtedly making Mikkola a little bit uncomfortable. .7 seconds, 2.6. The advance of the Delage is unstoppable at this point, it would seem. Here we go, here's Lazaro overtaking Federico Megias. But let's go to Lindholm. On board here with the Delage. 4.7 seconds to go. where the overtake's going to be. 0.9, 0.8. Such a speed differential here. It's going to be a straight one run down the left hand side. If the delage has anything to do with this. The track's starting to really dry out now as conditions improve here at Tours. But they're into the town now. Here's the very slow right-hander. So this is where the delage can shine with its better acceleration than the Sunbeam. See the delage catching a little bit of a puddle there, and that might be slowing things down just a touch, but I think it's now a climb up the hill, and only a few moments to go into the inevitable seems to happen, where the Lindholm delage will hit a straight and find a way past Nicola's Sunbeam. For a second. See tantalisingly close advances of the delage as they start to get closer and closer through the twistier sections of the track. Track almost dry now. Still some puddles remaining in parts, but through the twisty section. Only a matter of moments to go. We have seen some of the cars cut the inside of some of the corners here and get onto the grass. That may be a death sentence at this juncture. Lap 16 about to start as Nurmi approaches the line. A bit of a drag race at the moment. Look at this, the slipstream from the delage not quite giving it what it needs. But here we go, a little bit more advantage from the delage now as Lindholm waits patiently for the moment to strike. Straight run down to that 90-degree right-hander now, and that's typically where the delage has the advantage over the Sunbeam. Here they come. Will this be a game of chicken on the brakes, or will it be an acceleration zone? The Sunbeam deploying the quintessential smoke screen, but the delage now starting to come up strong with that acceleration. Hasn't quite found the way past just yet though, as we see the wind increase now a little bit. Track temperature remains relatively stable. Wind starting to pick up a little bit, only 4 kilometers an hour though, so nothing too much to worry about. Still no overtake from Lindholm yet. This is proving to be a little bit harder from their point of view than they might have otherwise expected, considering how close they, how quickly they closed the gap. They just need to seal the deal now. Still standing water in the town, making the track just a little bit more narrow. Here's the opportunity for the Delage. He's on the throttle. Acceleration's the Delage's strong point, but they are literally neck and neck. And don't think it's going to be as straightforward. But there we go. The Delage now back in front, but look at this. The Sunbeam isn't done yet. Seems to be attempting a comeback. As they come to the right-hander here. Look at that water on the track. Smoke billowing from the Sunbeam's exhaust pipe as they get the power down. And Mikkola and Lindholm's battle continues for another lap here at Tour. That being said, though, Mikkola's now slowly seeing their gap to Lindholm increase, as what was a 0.4 second gap behind now becomes a 0.9 second gap ahead. Through the start-finish line. There's the C6 being lapped by Lindholm and Mikkola. Such a difference in sound between the two cars. The Delage is a much higher revved like hum to it, whereas the Sunbeam comes past like a neat chug. So it seems like Mikkola's chances of coming back from this now are well and truly over. Lindholm breaking away with a 2-second gap in the Delage as they fly away from the Sunbeam. Meanwhile, out from front, as has been the case for the entirety of the race almost, Nurmi here with a significantly growing gap. 2 minutes and 6 seconds to Peltonen, who's running in P2 in a Fiat. And nothing seems to be showing any signs of slowing Nurmi down. It'd be very unfortunate for Nurmi if they had any kind of mechanical failure at this point in the race. So. Winds increased just another notch to 5 kilometers an hour, nothing too significant. Track temperature warming up a little bit as well, was 31, now 34, as the sun's come back out again and the track's dried off following the rain. currently approaching the town at 190 kilometers an hour. Seems to have their braking points down pretty nicely, although slight mistake there from Nurmi. Again, maybe the fatigue of the race starting to set in now. So a couple of mistakes we've seen from Nurmi, but again with such a large gap, they seem to be in pretty safe territory. That being said, one big punt at this stage could mean a death sentence to Nurmi's win here. So I would caution anything too exciting on Nurmi's part. Nicola now 5.2 seconds behind Lindholm. Oh, look at Bugatti just rejoining the track. Looks like someone went a little bit awry. I think that was Heitinen. Yep, it was. Seemingly taking a little bit of a jaunt off into the sandpit. So track temperature up to 36 degrees again, warming up nice and quickly here at Tour. Now the sun's back beaming, track water has evaporated, conditions seem to be appearing back to normal. Nurmi rocketing along as they start the final lap here of the 1923 Grand Prix at Tour. Nothing seems to be going to stop Nurmi now from bringing home what has been a very tremendously solid victory. So no other action on track right now. Seems to be a pretty steady state. The closest two cars on the track seem to be Mikkola and Lindholm, which is still a 7-second gap. They are out front here with Nurmi as they complete their final revolution around the track. Throbbing hum of the Fiat supercharged engine there as they come round for the tricky right-hander. Looks like they're not too far behind someone else, judging by the track conditions there. Again, pretty big gaps now between most of the cars. Talking minutes in most cases. Only a few examples where it's below 10 seconds, and that is occupied by Mikkola to Lindholm and Darling to Magia. So weather conditions have cycled through the whole cycle now. We've had rain, overcast, patchy clouds, and back to full sun again. The drivers have had to contend with all of it. Lap times, though, seem to show that Nurmi with an 8:48.678 is still the fastest, although Marcus Pelletin has an 8:48.765 to their name. And then the next quickest is, and this hasn't really changed much since earlier on in the race, it's still Attila with an 8:59.336. That's the only Delage to crack the sub 9 minute barrier. Nurmi now gaining on a back marker by the looks of it. Is that Hayley Smith? No, it's not. That could be down. Yeah, it is. It's Dauger. Look at that speed differential, though. Considering that they are, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, in exactly the same car. Sorry, no, I stand mistaken. Dauger's in the 804 Fiat, which is the 1922 Canon Power. It's the 1923 Fiat 805 405, which is what Nurmi and Pelletin are driving, and that's why it's so significantly faster. Nurmi now approaching the 90-degree right-hander. Bit of an off there for Nurmi on the last lap. That would have been a really disastrous turn of events if they'd hit a lamppost now. There's a big clock in the middle of the dashboard. Analog clock, of course. So Nurmi's actually up on their lap time at the moment, 0.3. They're going for the lap record once more before the end of the race. Last lap for Nurmi was an 8:53.683. Through the town now, quite a significant sense of speed from the inside view here. Up on their time now by 0.7. Getting the foot in, trying to claim as much advantage as they possibly can from the Fiat on the final run here. No need to worry about temperatures now, it's all about giving that right foot as much of a push as you possibly can. Nurmi is almost there for the final lap. Through the hairpin. Bit of wheel spin as well, wow. 1.25, 1.34, 1.4, 1.5 almost. Definitely going for the record now. So the engine can hold out. 1.82 seconds. Or thereabouts up on their time. Here comes the start-finish line. Nothing seems set to stop Nurmi now. And they finished with an 8:44.607, so took a good chunk of time off their lap there. Well done, Nurmi. So that leaves Peltonen with second place, but he's going to wait 2 minutes to get there now. few of the other drivers finishing up now because of their position on track. So Heitinen has finished in 9th place, Darga finishes in 18th place. Peltonen though, 4 seconds up on their time, they are going to be a little bit of a competitor to Nurmi's time, and they finish with an 8:44.736, just short of the target, but very well done to Peltonen. Paul van Rosen though, looks set to be bringing home the 3rd spot for the Delage. Great to see a Delage on the podium, and not just 3 Fiats. Paul van Rosen's best lap is a 9:05.196. Looks like Jay Lamour has finished in P10. There we go, Paul van Rosen finishes up the podium with the Delage 2 LCV with a 9:04.787, their best lap of the race. So far, all the top 3 drivers just set their best lap on the last lap of the race. Johnny Lindholm set a 9:02.741 on the last lap. That was their best lap of the race. Let's see if they can better that. And they look set to do that with a 3.69 positive delta. we go, Johnny Lindholm finishes again on the fastest lap for them, 8:58.823. So that actually might be faster than, yeah, it's faster than Uatilla's 8:59.316. So doesn't seem like Uatilla is going to be doing that. They did have the fastest lap of the race in the Delage, but that's now gone to Johnny Lindholm. Uatilla now crossing the line. They finish up the 1923 Grand Prix here at Tours. And that leaves Walbert in the Sunbeam, heading home for a Prix 7 finish. And Walbert looks set to beat their current best lap time by about 2 seconds. Seems like everyone's pulled out all the stops for their final lap. Which raises an interesting question as to who had the fastest lap in a Sunbeam. I think given Walbert's the only Sunbeam on the track, I think that makes Walbert with a 9:12.865. 8:55, sorry, the fastest Sunbeam here today. So we can see Nurmi and Peltonen now off to the side of the track with their matching livery Fiats in formation. And we're just waiting on Wojciechowski and Darling Lippi to finish the race. Darling in the number 6 Bugatti, still buzzing along. They are 1 minute 50 or so behind the next driver along. But they appear to be losing speed. Right, they're setting off again. Quite brilliant at this time of racing where the cars all had such different characteristics. The C6, the Bugatti and all the other cars looks totally different. Although the likes of the Delage and the Fiats and so on Sunbeams look a little bit more similar, but the Bugatti and the C6 definitely standing out as a class of their own, appearance-wise at least. Darling running a little bit wide. Now heading down to the line. And the race has been forcibly ended there. So now I believe there may be some post-race interviews if Garamond can drag anyone down here. Paul van Rosen, congratulations on your podium. What a fantastic race! Great watching you today. How did you find the racing today? Yeah, that's great. Did you have any pit stops today? Yeah, that was my chief question. I thought the tyres might have the distance, but the fuel was going to be an issue because I know that the Fiats are very fuel hungry. But were you able to get a little bit more mileage out of your Delage? Very good. And I was enjoying your battle with Peltonen at various points in the race. Tell me about the moments where you were fighting for position. Yeah, I suppose that's the downside of a track like Tour. The straights are very long, so you might be able to make some time back in the corners, but there's only so much corner out on a track like this. So yeah, well, great to see you out there and fighting the good fight in the Delage. Great to see you, you put a Delage on the podium as well today. What's your key takeaway from today's racing then? Very good. And what's your plan for the next round in the league? Yeah, that's great. And Garamond was very kind to give me a little bit of a kind of a briefing document before the race. He mentioned that the Delage is a pretty agile and fast car, but has some reliability issues on the engine department. So did you have to manage your engine today at all, or were you generally finding it okay? That's really good. I saw actually, I think it was Peltonen. At one point, he was really gunning his Fiat, and then at some point just had to pull over at the side of the track. And I thought he had some kind of critical damage, but he must have just been cooling off potentially. Is that an issue for some of the other cars? Yeah, so definitely lots of facets of this race to manage, all kinds of strategy and tactical decisions to make. But it seems like you've had a pretty good mixture of all of those coming together in your favour today. And I wish you all the very best of luck with the remaining rounds of the league. Thank you for coming in for an interview. See you, Paul. Thank you. Now, I don't see anyone else in the Discord voice channel, so I'm going to assume that was the one and only interview that we had there from the wonderful Paul van Rosen, who's finished third place here today. So I think the post-race steps now will be that the points will be calculated. As you mentioned, as you heard there, Paul van Rosen mentioned that you can, in this league, buy and sell your cars, and there may be some switching up of car strategy for some of the drivers going forward for the remainder of the round. But there are plenty of rounds left to go. I'm just going to quickly see if I can pull up a list of what's left in the championship, and I believe there's something like 16 rounds in total. So there's definitely going to be a lot of racing to come. If I can just pull that up quickly. So yes, we've just completed round number 2 at Tours. Round 3, happening on the 12th of April, will be in Spain. And then that is one of many races. There's 25 races in total, extending all the way out in the calendar to the 6th of February 2027. So plenty more racing to come. Hopefully you've enjoyed the commentary adding to the action here today at Tours. I've certainly enjoyed myself very much. And without further ado, I shall end the stream there and wish you all a very good evening, and catch you on the